All right, so welcome everyone. We are here with Barry Nadler for the instructional design series that he's been hosting for the ATD Central Florida chapter. And Barry, thank you so much. We are learning so much from this, and we've got a few eager participants here waiting for you. And without further delay, I'm going to kick it to you. So you can get started on, this is session 3, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so take it away, Barry.
All right, so welcome everybody. Today we're going to be talking about knowledge management and better knowledge management and rethinking a modern learning ecosystem. So let's go ahead and the first thing I want to do is I want to throw out there my personal mantra and my biases so you know kind of where I'm coming from when I talk through all this stuff. So my mantra is that companies don't need more content, that the people within the organization know where the content is that they have. They need somebody to partner with that can focus on it with support and, you know, get it, find it, bring it, and make it available. So to me, the best courses that I create are the courses that I don't actually have to create. Because when you work for a large organization, they've been creating content on all these different teams and divisions for years. And so there's a knowledge management problem rather than we need training on this thing. So therefore I have to go spend months of development time to build that. So over the years, I've moved away from actually creating courses. So in thinking through this, it's also the thought that it might be in people's heads. So we're not talking about knowledge that exists always in documentation or courses that exist or what have you. We have to be thinking about the resources that in people's heads, that part of our job is to get them to actually speak so that you can get it out, because that's kind of the hardest part, is people don't know that that exists. Many years ago, I was in a situation where I had to create a knowledge library for a client support team. And part of the problem was multiple people on the team had the same pieces of information in job aids that they created that needed to either come together. One of them needed to be the source of truth, and trying to figure out who had which pieces of information and which had the right ones. It was a big project. So what teams seem to need, at least in the situations I've been in, is they need people that can help curate that knowledge and the resources that exist, which also means they have a challenge themselves doing it, because they're actually trying to do their job, their daily job. And sometimes they don't realize what they know and what they don't know. And they're so busy doing their job that they don't have the time to do the sorting and the filtering and the curating and all of that to get it to where it needs to be. So they need that partner. And, you know, if they can't find it, if it's out of date, or if it's just straight up new information, at that point, that's when I go, okay, we need to build something here. So that's kind of my plan. When I get put on a project, this is my first lens and the first way that I think. And I want to make sure that you guys know that going into this discussion. So with that, what does knowledge management mean to you guys? So let's kind of do a round robin and see. And I'm looking over here on my list here, and I'm just going to start in the top corner, which is Scott. So congratulations, you win. You win. What does the term knowledge management mean to you?
Knowledge management to me means just organizing information to where people could find it and it's easily usable. So reducing friction, and just making things very accessible. As few folders and hierarchies as possible. Search friendly. Basically, you should be able to pull it up very rapidly.
Okay, let's keep going around. So next on my list there is Ashley. So Ashley, what do you think?
I agree with a lot of what Scott said. I think it's just having some sort of system to compile the knowledge, understanding what kind of knowledge you want to capture, and then having a system to know who can access it and how to find it, like he was saying as well.
Okay, and I'm just going to throw the question out there to see kind of what happens, but what about technology? Where does technology fall into that? What tools are we talking about, you think?
Oh man, there's so many tools today. I guess it depends on your company, right? And budgets.
Sure.
Um, I'm just trying to think of what my company does currently. Of course, a lot of it is in, I guess, different folders, like Scott was saying, on either a centralized database, like ours is mainly some things on Microsoft Teams. It's some of it stored there before it then gets pushed out to the firm through an LMS. I'm also not particularly on the instructional design side, so I'm a little bit of
Okay.
I'm on the facilitation side, so
Okay,
sharing what I know at least.
that's fine. So Karen, you're next on my list. So Karen, what do you think about knowledge management and some of the tools that get used, and what does it all mean?
So I think Ashley and Scott said a lot about it. I'm thinking back to my contact center days. And it was important that the information was easily or quickly updated, and there was a process in place to capture any, updates to process. I'm thinking of Royal Caribbean pricing, any kind of changes would be updated quickly, and being able to push that information out to people right away. We used actually SharePoint for our Asian markets. And then we used, I can't even remember what the tool was, but it was basically just like a searchable, database where you could include links, images, all sorts of things, because our agents on the phone needed, if a guest called in and said, where is room 2536? And, can you describe it to me? They'd need to be able to pull up a plan so they could describe the staterooms.
Okay, great. Jackie, thoughts?
Honestly, this is one of the reasons I really signed up for this session, because I was
Okay.
like, ooh, that is something that is not really done well at my organization right now. And so I'm kind of exploring it on my own. I'm kind of dabbling a little bit in SharePoint, but in terms of doing it well, I'm very not in the know.
That's okay. And just for the record, I'm not going to claim that I'm doing it well. So I think this is something that's a messy thing because of the amount of people involved in it, that it's very hard to centralize and control it. So Rosa, how about you?
So I agree with everything everyone said. I think another part of the process, something that I do in my organization, is have clear understanding of who is responsible for the different content, right? And so I know who to go to make sure, hey, is this the most updated content, right? So we do that. And tools, we use a lot of different tools. A lot of things go on our SharePoint site. So our internet is on SharePoint, and so we capture things there using form stack tool. People can submit things to us. So it's like a survey form they fill out and say, hey, here's this thing I created, right? And then we either upload it there or not. And some things make it to the LMS. Everything doesn't necessarily make it to the LMS, some things don't need to be, right?
Right.
But I would agree that it takes the whole village, if you want to call your company that, and it really has to be a concerted effort where everyone is kind of staying on top of, things change or there's new things or, who needs to know and all of that. And then how do we disseminate that to everyone that needs to have it in an easily accessible way? Thinking of, are they in the field or are they in an office or are they virtual, right? How do we get the information to them?
Yep, there's a lot in all of that.
It's an ugly spider, yeah.
Yeah. So, and Daniel, you get the benefit of being last because everybody's kind of answered. Do you have anything you want to add?
Not much new, but I mean, knowledge management for me has always been about creating and maintaining and being able to disseminate, like find ways of disseminating learning resources to employees and such.
Okay.
It's kind of a multi-tiered process.
And that's where one of my biases come in. which is why I said what I said at the beginning, because you were talking, the first thing you said was creating. So it's not always, for me, it's not always about creating. So yeah. Hey, I'm gonna step away for like half a second. My dog is outside the door and he's like whining because of the weather outside. So I'm gonna let him come into the room.
Yes.
Come on. All right, there you go. All right. So back to the thing here. So I looked up knowledge management to get an official definition. And this is the official definition that was on Google. And it says that it's the process by which an organization gathers, organizes, shares, and analyzes its knowledge in a way that is easily accessible to the employees. So it's pretty straight, pretty simple, but it includes gathering, organization, sharing, and how you share it, and then how you analyze what you have and making it available. So I think all of these things were brought up in what everybody was saying. So that's, I think it matches. I think we're all in the same boat. So now we have a common definition to work from. So there's 5 steps to knowledge management, and they are the discovery stage, the capture stage, indexing, vetting, and then the distribution. And discovery is going to be like when you go out, you have to identify the knowledge that's useful to the company's goals and operations. And this is very similar to when we're doing instructional design, and we have to figure out what is the content that's going to be in the program. So this is just that at a larger scale. And I actually just kind of finished that for myself at my office. I've been trying to put together a curriculum of content, and the discovery phase is the phase I've been in. And now I'm in the capturing and indexing phases, because we're gathering all of the knowledge, we're categorizing it, making it easy to find, figuring out where it needs to go, how do we disseminate it, that kind of thing. And in that, I'll share that today, I actually sent out a message saying I'm going to rethink some stuff, because one of the things that I was wanting to do is I was wanting to get managers involved in the program. And the problem is the managers don't know what's in the program. So I can go through and give them a PDF and say, here's, a manager guide. It's going to talk about the things that are in the program. It's going to talk about new skills, the KPIs that they should be watching because of people in the program, and then a whole lot of like discovery questions. And we just really don't have a good way to get that to them. And it just seems really archaic. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to rethink this. So I set up a design thinking session with some of the folks that are my stakeholders so that we can co-create this together. And so it's the people that are going to be using it as well as the people creating it to see if we can come up with a better way. So that's part of that so I'm taking it back to the discovery stage on that, I guess, is the way to look at that. So, but anyway, so then the next step would be to vet, which is validating what was collecting. So I've been sending stuff to some of the different leaders as well and saying, hey, can you just look through this and just make sure that it is current, it's accurate, it does what you need, and that I'm gathering the right bits of information. And then eventually we distribute it and share it with the organization. And then however, whatever tools your teams use, that's what you use to distribute. And we'll talk about some of that later. So I'm going to bring back this designing for modern learning from last week, because this knowledge management piece is really important for the cluster of learning assets and the upgrading of existing assets to the top and the bottom. So this little dude down here and this little guy up here. And maybe this one as well. I guess if you really want to get technical, it's also this one too, right? Because you're figuring out how to disseminate information so that you can, change on the job behavior. But I wanted to point these out because without having some kind of a knowledge management system, whatever that is, it becomes very hard to gather up these assets. And you end up in a situation where you don't know where anything is, so you just make something new. So it impacts that one. And then being able to gather all of those assets together and being able to look at them as a whole and saying what needs to be updated and what does not is part of the discussion. I I'm actually having this discussion as well. I was going through some e-learning today because of these manager guides that I was talking about, trying to gather up all of the challenge questions for the guides. And I found myself just like wanting to poke my eyes out, like we were talking about earlier before we started the recording, because some of this stuff is older, and it means that it's using really bad text to speech, and it's using locked navigation, which was really hard to go through. I couldn't zip through stuff. Like I'd have to watch a video and there's like an introduction at the beginning of the video, and then there's a bumper at the end. It's like the logo and all that, and the copyright on like every single video. And you have to go all the way to the end of the player before it lets you continue. So I'm realizing that there's probably some upgrading of assets that's going to have to happen that are not my assets. I didn't make them. So somebody else on the team is going to probably have to make some decisions about that and how that's going to work. So I bring all that up to say this is how the designing for modern learning and the OKLCD model connect to what we're talking about today. So our knowledge management at FIS, we have two pieces of it. We have a formal situation and we have an informal situation. And I'm going to assume that most of you have the same. And that is that our formal side is our LMS. That's our primary one. And that is we have a client facing and an internal facing version of it, but it is the same system. It is a Saba or Cornerstone LMS, and it has multiple domains in it. One domain is internal and one is external, and it goes by two different names. So that way we can keep them apart, right? So the internal one is called WeLearn and the external one is called FIS Academy. So content can be shared across both sides. We use a tool called ServiceNow as our ticketing system for our client support teams, and as well as some of the development and things like that. That system happens to have a knowledge base inside of it. So in that, you can create articles and you can assign those articles to tickets. And when people go into ServiceNow, if they want to look up something, they can type it in and then knowledge articles will come up as well as various tickets. So having that, we actually have a team on our learning solutions group where their job is to go through and put articles into ServiceNow for the client facing side. And then we hope that people internally do that. There was a push at one point where everybody had it in their goals to create so many knowledge articles to beef that up. And for me, that's a really important thing. We actually had somebody that I was talking to, turns out she had a OneNote document, and she'd been with the company for several years, and she was working on this for like 3 years, and she had 2,000 OneNote articles in her notebook. She did not know that we had a knowledge base, and the problems that she was having were related to like hyperlinks and things, because OneNote lives on the OneDrive, and so links break and things are constantly getting updated. So we're trying to work with her to get those articles into this knowledge base inside of ServiceNow. So then we also have SharePoint. So SharePoint, as I believe, Jackie, you talked about SharePoint, you can build libraries and things like that in there, and you can link from SharePoint directly into a learning management system. So it's a much cleaner interface, and you can focus things, and you can have entries that fold and unfold like on a Mac. And so you can have a lot of information on a page and not overwhelm people, and they can find the things that they need, and they can link directly in where they need to go. So our intranet is also based on SharePoint, so that's why I have that listed there. Stream is a Microsoft product. Stream is like internal YouTube. And so as we make videos, we put those videos into Stream for internal use. It doesn't work externally, but internally it does. And the newest version of Stream is based on SharePoint. So one of the things that it can do is it has embed codes, so you can embed videos from Stream directly onto a SharePoint site. You can add chaptering to it. You can also generate closed captions on any video. So it becomes a really good tool, and I've leveraged that very heavily in a lot of the projects that I've been working on. So on the informal side, we use Microsoft Teams. So that also sits on top of SharePoint on the back end, I believe. So we use Teams channels. So that's how we control pieces of information, who can be on the various teams. And then it has all kinds of different apps inside that people can use. Do you guys know what Stack Overflow is? Has anybody heard of that? No, everybody's shaking. Oh, Jackie, you know what it is?
Yeah, it's like for programmers and developers. It's kind of like a Q&A site.
That's right. That's absolutely correct. So basically what you can do is people ask questions and other people that are the experts can come in and thumb it up or down on whether the answers are good or not. And then the better answers flow to the top. So people can go there and type in their question, and kind of like with ServiceNow, right? They can figure out what the right answers are. So we're trying to use that in various ways within the company. I don't have any say in how that thing is being used, but I know they're using it for like the client experience, so CX type stuff. And they're also using it in the programming and development world. And then we have Yammer, which also is part of the Microsoft 365 service that is like Facebook. So you can create groups and you can create personal profiles and you can post stuff and things of that nature. And the Yammer will all, because it's Office 365, it will connect to the Teams channels. And I believe you can also use it with the SharePoint sites and the ServiceNow stuff. I think the service, no, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. Not the ServiceNow, but you can use it with the SharePoint sites. So this is what our system looks like. And I don't control most of it. All right, I work with the folks that are on the LMS piece, and I can do SharePoint and I can do Stream. I don't own the Teams channels, but I can create some Teams channels, and I have nothing to do with Stack Overflow and the operation of Yammer. So this is what a large organization can look like. I don't know if this is a good structure or not, but this is where we're at. Do you guys want to talk about what your learning ecosystems look like a little bit so people can hear and see what you guys got?
I can go, I can share.
Yeah.
Ours looks a lot like yours. We have Yammer, but so kind of like when we moved over to Microsoft 365, 100%, people saw it was there and they're like, oh, let me try this, right? So it's more of staff trying it, not necessarily IT and above saying, okay, this is how we're going to use it. So that's currently like all over the place, and something they're looking to further use. We do use Microsoft Teams quite a bit for those like information disseminating for different groups within the organization. And then on the formal side, we're pretty much exactly the same, except for ServiceNow. Instead of ServiceNow, our ticketing system also, which is it's called Manage Engine, but it also has a knowledge base, and so we're able to create those articles and solutions in there, so someone could easily just search and find. But I always wonder, do we have enough? Because I get all these questions from staff of where's this and where's that. So either we're not communicating very well of where things are, or we truly are missing things, tools that they need, answers to questions, and they're just not out there.
I suspect it's the first one, that it's not being communicated well as to where pieces of information are and how things are being used. Because one of the challenges is L&D doesn't control all of this.
Yeah, I control nothing.
Yeah.
Except the LMS.
So because you don't control it, you also don't control like how other teams use their Teams channels and the file systems on the back end of that, or the SharePoint sites they create. You just, so it becomes like the Wild West, and there's nothing you can do about it except try and ask people where things are at. I mean, I've seen situations where there's a backside of the Teams channel in the files, and there's a folder that's called training, and it's just full of documents and presentations. And there's no order, there's no structure to it. There's no, there's not even a guide that says follow this order, like one Word document or something, or they're not named in a way that would make sense to go, okay, this is the first thing, the second thing, the third thing. So you kind of just have to work with what you're given. And then the next step is for us as the L&D department to go to those teams and say, hey, we'd like to help you and advise and guide you on how to clean up some of this stuff to make it more user friendly. That way we can connect it to things that we're using and the pieces can work together. So anybody else want to talk about what their system looks like, their knowledge management stuff?
Yeah, I can go. I think it's funny. I'm at Allstate and it's very similar. And also I was laughing because does any company use Yammer well?
I don't think
Yammer
they do.
is like just there. Nobody uses it. But it's a part of that Office 365. But I find, I'm at Allstate now. I was at Royal Caribbean before. And it was the same issue in that, to your point, Barry, some departments would structure their SharePoint site and they might have a folder with like all this good information. And you wouldn't even know about it because it doesn't pick it up when you do a search in OneDrive or SharePoint. And then on the other side of things, you have like our contact center had the knowledge library down to a science because of the fact that people needed to access information quickly and it needed to be updated quickly because things were constantly changing. And once I discovered that the contact center had this whole like knowledge base of all things Royal Caribbean, I started going there instead because they actually had a lady who was the knowledge library manager. And if you were going to change any documents, if there were sale price changes, new ships coming out, they all had to go through her to approve the changes to go into the system. She was fast, but she controlled it. And I hate to say like that's the way to go, but I feel like somebody's got to be over it. Otherwise, you have these different like departments of knowledge where they're doing it well, and then the rest of it is all over the place. And then you end up having 7 places or 6 places to go to look to try to find information.
Can you imagine going to the library, and there's no librarian?
Right.
There's nobody there that knows where anything is. The books are all just thrown on the shelves.
Right. Like try that corner over there. There's a pile of books. Go look over there. And that's what it feels like sometimes when you're looking for information. And I'll add and then I'll be quiet. But also some people were holding onto folders of old information. So you might do a search and you'll find a document from like 2005 and that thing was updated in 2019.
Yeah.
But it's saved off in somebody's pile. So
I know I'm one of those people that does that. I don't like to let things go because I know that at some point it may come back around, and it never does.
No,
it never does. But that's me just keeping on because of the work that was involved to create the thing. So anybody else want to share?
I was just gonna say I had to look up Yammer, and is that now Microsoft Viva Engage? Do you know?
Yes, it is. It just changed names. Yep.
So our company recently transitioned. We actually updated our entire like internal website essentially to a SharePoint based website. And I think we're using some of this like Viva Insights technology within that. So we're all still getting used to it, but it seems really interesting in how people can be served information kind of customized based on their role. And then also the search functionality seems pretty user friendly. But my company as well, very similar as far as Cornerstone is the LMS. We have definitely a lot on SharePoint now. I think we're trying to focus more towards that. Although Stream for us is probably more on the informal side where it's just all of the recordings that we've ever had of meetings or trainings just end up getting stored there. But it is extremely difficult to coordinate who has access to those recordings, how to share them, how to grant access. For whatever reason, it seems very clunky.
It is a little clunky, and I think it's something you have to wrap your head around, because there were 2 versions, right? There was the Stream Classic from before, which was really easy. You'd upload the video and then you just assign rights to it. I just had this problem the other day. I had never uploaded something to the new version of Stream that I needed to like share to lots of people.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize that when I shared it, it went to my OneDrive.
Yes.
So when I shared it out to other people in a Rise site, they couldn't see it. I had to create a folder inside of SharePoint that was like shared publicly with the company. And then that folder is the one that I just am supposed to drop stuff into. And supposedly on the back end, I can make it's a library. So you put it into a library, and because it's a library, you can now tag it with data fields and things. So it's a little more complex. But I suspect it's once you wrap your head around all that, it
Mhm.
becomes easy. But I think this is a thing that as internal training, L&D needs to take on, not the ownership of this, but teaching people how to use this, how to use these systems and make these systems usable. So, and if you bring it into your like new hire onboarding, it becomes over time part of the culture, because every new hire gets exposed to how knowledge management within the company should work and the different tools that you have and things like that. And I suspect that as companies, we're not doing that well. Is anybody doing that in their new hire onboarding stuff?
I think that's a genius idea, and it should be. It should be that it's part of the culture. It's part of the culture of learning, and similar to how you talk about how many PTO days you get, right? So
Mhm.
let's talk about how we share knowledge, right?
Right.
This is how
This
we
is a
share
new
knowledge.
thing for
Yeah,
companies sharing knowledge.
yes, I think I love that idea of add it to your new hire onboarding orientation, create, a micro lesson or something of how we do it, say at Career Source or wherever that you share with them so they get it.
Because the other thing that's going to do long term for people's careers is if they're no longer at your company and they go to another company, they're going to take that with them.
Good habits.
Yeah. By the way, on this list, I've just realized is the wikis are not part of this, we're not in this list, but our company uses a ton of wikis as well. All right. So this was a book that I mentioned before when we did the preview of this program, is what could a modern ecosystem look like? And I saw JD Dillon, like I said, he spoke. And JD Dillon is a Central Florida ATD member. So he's here in Orlando, and he spoke about this about a year or so ago, early last year, which is his modern learning ecosystem. So a lot of what I'm about to share, we're gonna go through again. It was something I talked about in the previous events, but this is the book that drove that. So how is a learning ecosystem different than knowledge management? And is it even different? What do you guys think of that? If you think back to the tool of what I showed our learning system, our ecosystem look like, and then you guys talked about your ecosystems, how is that different than a learning ecosystem? And is it? What do you think?
I say those are two different animals. One is how the different systems where people access learning, complete learning, uh, etc. And then to me, knowledge management is the process of how you manage all of that, right? What's your system? The system that you put in place to make sure you're gathering the content and sharing the content and making sure that content is updated. And that can, have different tools that are used as well, different platforms that might not be part of the learning ecosystem.
Yeah, so if we go back to this discussion here, is a Microsoft Teams channel, is that part of the learning ecosystem, or is it just part of knowledge management and that
It could be both.
ecosystem?
It could be part of both.
Right. And what about like the ServiceNow knowledge base
For me,
or Stream?
it's both. I think it's both. But so, for example, using us as an example, right? We use FormStack for the capturing of Barry has an article that he wrote. So Barry submits that article via the FormStack survey link, if you will, right? However, it's then uploaded to SharePoint and or the LMS and shared with, you know, possibly the teams that may need it and Microsoft Teams.
So if
But-
you create a SharePoint site and you put knowledge articles or links to learning programs or that kind of stuff on that SharePoint site, is that part of the learning ecosystem, or is that just part of your knowledge management system? And I guess the bottom line is, does it matter? Or is it all just jargon?
Right. In our world, it's both, right? And to your point, does it matter, right? The big part, Karen said it earlier, and I think Ashley did as well. Do people have the things that they need? Do they have the access to the resources just in time when needed, right?
Yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts or opinions on this?
So I think there's a lot of similarities. I do think there's some slight differences, similar to what Rose was saying. I think the knowledge management is very just-in-time learning, where the learning ecosystem, I think a lot of that's also going to be a lot more pushing out learning, where the knowledge management is going to be a lot more of the learner-driven, pulling data. So it's definitely a combination of both. Knowledge management isn't necessarily as much push as I think the entire learning ecosystem is going to be.
That's a really interesting differentiation. I hadn't thought about that. But like the learning ecosystem is much more formal and the knowledge management system is a lot less formal.
Yeah.
That's an interesting approach, I thought. Thanks, Scott. What else do you guys think? Anything?
I was thinking, I kind of took it a different direction. I was picturing a learning ecosystem to be kind of this web of all of the different modalities that you can learn or train. And then the knowledge management may be more on the back end of understanding where these things live, the intention for keeping them, updating them, or removing them, and so forth. So I kind of look at that more back end.
That's interesting as well.
Well, and hearing you say that, Ashley, the learning ecosystem is also going to include your live facilitation and a lot of your, like those type of modalities where the knowledge management is going to be more electronic, maybe paper-based manual, but more electronic at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
kind of see the learning ecosystem almost more like a catalog of like courses. Like you're thinking of like how do programs like formulate together. I think of I don't see necessarily how like knowledge based articles would kind of like fit into that. I see the learning ecosystem, like you said, as a lot more formal learning, whereas the knowledge management is more of a catch-all of like has contents from the learning ecosystem and whatever else it needs to encapsulate.
Yeah, the good news is I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer here. It's just us understanding what it is that we're actually even talking about and having a common kind of definition so that we're all in the same page. So this is great discussion. So if these are the kind of things that most companies use from a training standpoint, there's no order here. This is just a list of coaching, performance support, pull training, which is what we were talking about, where people are actually pulling information from you. They're doing it on their own. It's probably the more informal. And then push training is the more formal. And then you have reinforcement type activities. And then you have the shared knowledge, which is your knowledge articles and your SharePoints and your, that kind of stuff and your Microsoft Teams. So if this is what a modern learning ecosystem would contain, if we put it on a list of priority from high to low, high at the bottom to low at the top, do you guys agree with this? That the highest priority that most companies do is that push training, where we create courses, we create content, we push it out to you, you go take it, whatever that means. And then pull training is the employees coming and trying to get stuff from you. Then it's the shared, and then it's the coaching and reinforcement and performance support getting the least amount of attention. Would we agree with that? Everybody's kind of sort of.
I would agree.
Okay.
That's where our focus is, and not by my choice. Again,
Yeah.
it's what leaders want to do, right?
Right. So if we add another line across the bottom that's tied to availability, is how readily available are these things for people to have access to? It kind of changes the diagram a little bit. And you now have shared knowledge being the most accessible because it's searchable, it's out there, you can get it anytime you want. Performance support kind of comes right in behind that because that's like your help systems, your, the videos and all that kind of stuff. Reinforcement activities, and then you get your pull training, and then you get your push, your coaching lands in there, and then your push training actually is the hardest to make available because it requires a person for a live training. It requires attendees. It requires an e-learning developer, IDs, the process of how long does it take to make it. So therefore it's kind of weird that the highest priority in a company tends to be the least available thing. And the thing that's up at the top there, that performance support and the shared knowledge, are much less priority. So this is the tenet of what J.D. Dillon is talking about. He says, what if we reorganize this diagram and we make it look like this? And we focus on the high priority, high availability down at the bottom. And we call that the shared knowledge, and then the performance support reinforcement. And then you go up the ladder. This was not the catalyst for me because I was kind of already there. But when I saw him redo this diagram, that was one of the key moments where I said, I'm on the right path. And that path is, don't create a course unless I have to. How do I get more shared knowledge, more performance support? How do I involve the managers for coaching? And then if I need to do pull and push training, I can deal with that. And that's when this time around, when I needed to create some learning programs, I focused at the bottom on that shared knowledge, and I went out and I went to the ServiceNow knowledge base, and I went out to SharePoint, I went to Stream, and I went to all these other places to try and figure out how can I curate that information back to here. And that's when I said I found that woman that had 2,000, OneNote articles that could go in that shared knowledge piece. To me, that's a huge win if I can make that happen, right? Because it's the high availability, high priority thing. So the way he proposes this is that you start at the bottom when you're trying to solve a learning solution or a learning problem. You start at the bottom and you work your way up rather than starting at the top and saying we need to make a course and working your way down. And he said, if you can stop in that reinforcement area, if you can fill in stuff there, you've got to win, because now you're being able to react very quickly to problems. And, we talked about what some of the things about being a performance consultant and a learning consultant last week. This is one of those things that if you can figure out how to make things available in that shared knowledge and the performance support and reinforcement, that's that consulting level as opposed to being an instructional designer pushing out training. So the bad news is it's never as easy as it looks. This is hard. And that's something I'm learning now, is that it's not an easy thing. So my current role is that I am being asked to create certification programs for various roles within the company, within the division of banking solutions, which means that I am working with people that are on the payments teams. I'm working with the people that work in the banking and there's another division part that I'm not working in yet that I can't remember what it is because I'm not working in it yet, but trying to figure out how do I train the different levels of implementation staff? How do I train the client support staff? There's level 1, level 2s, that kind of thing. And how do we teach them how to be the managers to be coaches in that environment? And one of the problems that it was really easy to go, hey, why don't we create certification programs for these job roles? That's an easy thing to do, right? Well, it is until you say, well, we can't certify what we don't have content for. And you start talking to people and you realize that people have information, and what we have in the learning organization isn't deep enough, because what we've been focusing on is client-facing training. So we haven't been teaching people like how to troubleshoot and what all the back ends of the settings of the things, the systems that they push out to the clients. So when they get implemented, somebody has to know how that stuff all works. And that's the piece that I have to certify. Well, we don't have content on that. So that becomes our problem. So the reality that I'm dealing with is somebody knows this stuff, because people are doing these jobs today. Who are those people, and what is that information they have, and where do I find it? Right. So I have to define information and skills for people to get certified. So so my first round of work has been to go around and go, okay, what's all the stuff that I know that people need that I can pull from the learning management system? I can make custom learning paths, and I can make a system that delivers those to people. Great. That's easy. That doesn't take much time. The next step is trying to figure out, how do I go beyond that to learn about these settings and the troubleshooting that people have to do? That's the stuff that I'm going to have to start talking to a lot of people. And I need people to sit down with me and let me record them talking. Let me record their screens as they're demonstrating things. And like we said earlier, people have day jobs, right? This is not their job. It's my job. So I have to work in their timeframes and with their projects, and making sure that that everybody's on board. So we're also talking about things at the organization level. So I've got to deal with the global HR side of things, the global learning team that has bigger things that they're trying to solve, and they have documents and programs that they're developing around leadership and soft skills, which are a lot of the things that people need. So I need to be able to include that. I have the division, so I have the banking solutions organization. So they have client experience type of stuff that they're trying to do. The entire client support team is trying to standardize on things. So I've got that type of content, and then we've got the various teams. So the team that handles this piece of the product, that team has their own way of doing things. So you have to think about all the different levels of where this content might be. And then when it's all said and done, you have to look at it and go, okay, what's not here? And when you figure out what's not there, that's when you have to start creating. And I have to go in and I have to go talk to the SMEs, and that's where the ID work comes in. So that's what my current role is right now. Do any of you guys do anything like this?
I anticipate I'm going to be doing a lot similar to that, Barry. I work with a lot of skilled trades and maintenance and custodial staff. And I know our VP, one of his priorities is to start working on certifications. So what we have going on is they've actually created a position, and one of our SMEs is going to fill that as the trainer. And I'll probably be working closely with him. So it'll help at least identify where the knowledge is and who has it. And then working together to actually capture it and push it back out.
Yep. And interestingly, we now have 2 or 3 people on our learning team that have job roles that are not specifically certification related, but are knowledge management oriented, as opposed to just creating content. So 3 challenges that I expect that anybody doing this type of work is going to experience is that it requires partnership from teams. And I mentioned that trying to get people's time and getting buy-in and all of that, it requires it requires that. So there's a relationship element on the front end of that has to happen. People have to agree that what you're doing is the right thing. And then it's time consuming. This is my full-time job and I'm doing it all the time. So it takes time to talk to all these different people for all these different job roles and then go back and gather all that information and coordinate it all. And it's time. It's not the kind of thing that you can just do as a sidecar on your day job. And that's the problem that the regular teams have. They need a person that's not on their team that can come in and help them, that it is their full-time position and they can focus on it. And does your organization have systems to host this type of an ecosystem? All of us seem to say yes. But if you don't have the tools, like if you don't have SharePoint, if you don't have a learning management system, if you don't have the Microsoft Stream or any of these you're going to have trouble implementing something like this because you don't have the tools to support it. And if you don't have it, is your company willing to provide budget to implement it? I think those are key things that could totally stop your efforts if you don't have that. You'd need another solution to that. So one of the things that this required was changing a question. And when the team that came before me that tried to do this, they were going out to the various teams and they were asking, what training does your team need? And they were getting blank stares and people putting off their emails and not responding. I turned around and came on and I changed the question. And I said, what challenges are your team having? And how are you going to measure the change to know that you're meeting these challenges? And once I changed that question, the doors opened. And all of a sudden, people were giving me all kinds of information and connecting me with this person or that person. And because I was trying to solve a problem that they had, rather than asking them what training they needed. They want to solve, this goes back to the business problems, the KPIs. So that's an important thing. Make sure you're asking the right question when you start going down this path of knowledge management and trying to address challenges that different teams are having. So in the OKLCD model, there were 9 elements to consider when it came to refreshing content and creating a learning cluster and that sort of thing. And questions were, if you've got a piece of content, how easy is it to find that piece of content? And your job is to make it accessible. That's one way that you can refresh that content and make it good. You can make it self-directed. So if you've got something that is not self-directed, a live class, you can turn around and make a self-directed version of that so that it becomes something that people can do whenever they need to. They can have both options. You can break content into smaller chunks, either videos or text, right? I mean, when we think about this, we think about e-learning, we think about videos and making short videos. But what if we're talking about articles? Instead of it being one article, maybe it's 2. Maybe it's not 1 job aid, it's 2, that kind of thing. Make the content current. And that's in a content and a branding standpoint. So you might have branding that changed at your company. Do you want to have a piece of content out there that has old branding? Does that matter? Excuse me. If it matters, you need to update the branding. What about the content? Is the content outdated? Have things changed? In our company, it's a software company. So there's going to be software changes. So is the content current? I had this problem today as well. Found out that they're redoing an entire course that I was curating through, looking for pieces of information in it. It turns out it's outdated. Doink, it's out of the program. I'm waiting for the new one to come in. Allow the learner to receive feedback from their input. So find ways to give learners feedback tied to their inputs. And I know I'm starting to go a little bit faster because I am looking at my clock and we are at like 7:58. So curate and deliver based on learner preferences. So if you know that people like e-learning and audio or video or things like that, you can find pieces of content that match those different types, and it allows the learner to pick the one that they prefer. You're linking content to more basic and more complex information. So that way they always have a place to go based on where they find your content. If they find it and they go, I need more information, this is too advanced for me, do they know how to step back and find the piece of information that can get them to the point where they can understand the piece of content they found? Or the other way, it might be too basic and they go, I'm actually looking for something a little more deep. Can I jump to the next thing that's more complex? So creating that web, making something more multimedia, and then including the ability for social interactions such as commenting, likes, coaching, mentoring, cohorts, and discussion groups, finding ways to, modernize it in that way. So is there anything here that's shocking or new to anybody? No? Okay.
Only
Good.
thing that I didn't think of is having links and resources to either more basic or more complex info.
Yeah, I would agree. That was one of the ones that caught me when I saw it. I was like, oh, that's a really good idea, actually. Because we tend to not do that. We don't think about that, but that's the performance support. So coming up here on the end, how do you see this topic connecting with last week's topics? So these, I'm trying to draw some lines because these are not independent things, right? We were asking questions and we were trying to solve problems. And so what are the things that make up the solution to this problem? So how does this knowledge management piece fit back into these two items that we talked about last week? Any opinions? Thoughts?
I think having a good knowledge management system is a big part of the solution, or a big part of that to modern learning in organizations. Because like you said in the beginning, a lot of it's there, but it's just not easily accessible, or so making that, it's the most efficient thing we could do for our time and budgets as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Any
it
other
goes back
thoughts?
to, I'm looking at the millennials, goldfish, and other training misconceptions.
Yeah.
I think in the grand scheme of things, it's just give me what I need when I need it. So, if I have like 15 minutes to just kind of gather some thoughts, maybe I want to find like, a Harvard Business Review article. If I want like a deep dive and, get some expertise, then let me be able to pull a video or something to deep dive. And I think that's where that, I don't know if we're calling it the learning ecosystem or the knowledge management, but that's what I think of in a learning ecosystem, is like being able to provide what the learner needs when the learner needs it. I keep thinking back to what you said last week, Barry, when it's like, we'll pay attention to what we need to when we're interested in it. Right. So yeah, I might have a 5-minute, 5-second attention span for, how to do brain surgery, but maybe how to make a pivot chart in Excel. I've got 30 minutes to pay attention and focus, right? Because that's what I need for my day to day.
Yeah.
That's the parallel I'm drawing.
Okay, cool. Any other thoughts on this? Because I've got a few more things that we can talk through here real quick. So which of these, remember we talked about these were the challenges. Which of these does this information that we talked about today help address? What do you guys think? Well, here's what I thought. I thought it helps in the remote and hybrid work environments, the no degree required roles, talent skills and reskilling, and then L&D becoming a retention advisor. Because by making things available, all of a sudden, some of these other things become more of a reality. That without a knowledge management system, some of these things don't work. That's where my brain went. I don't know if I'm right. I don't know if I'm missing something in the others, but this is where it seemed to like hit home a little bit strongly. So then when it comes to the questions that I was trying to ask, I put little green dots on the questions that I think knowledge management tries to solve. And you got the no degree required in there. You've got the K through 12 teachers. You've got L&D managers moving away from creating new programs to focusing on curating existing stuff. organizations creating mentorship programs at scale for students that are not college students, the ability to be able to skill up so they can be effective, and businesses looking to L&D to support when it comes to talent retention. So for me, everything that I've seen points to this thing, this knowledge management thing, addressing a lot of the challenges. If we can get the knowledge management piece right. And as we heard at the beginning, we're all kind of struggling with it. And but we've all kind of got the same systems. So it's really, how do we take those systems and make them a thing that actually can do this stuff? So does anybody have any thoughts on this?
I'm wondering, Barry, if you have any good examples of people that have good knowledge management, like individual knowledge management. I feel like I've got a pretty good system, but then once you start talking organization and groups, it gets hairy quick.
It gets hairy very quick. I don't have good examples. I wish I did. I think that would be something that would be really good. So I think there's a lot of people that have really good elements of these in different areas, right? This guy might have one element of it, and this company might have another element of it, but trying to find somebody that has all of it, I think that's a struggle because of the fact that there's so many people involved. So
Scott
many
pointed out,
divisions and teams.
I'm sorry, Barry.
Okay.
Scott made a comment earlier about like a culture change, right? So I feel like if you're in a startup and you're just starting your organization, that it's easier, right, to set something from the ground up. But what if you're in an established company? Then you do sort of need a culture change. You need everybody to keep like moving forward to the new way of working. Otherwise, it's not going to get anywhere, and people will still have their like little stacks of books. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Files everywhere.
And it involves other teams like IT and,
Yes.
you know, support and client support or whoever, you know, or in my case, it's the implementation teams and such. It requires all of those teams to move together, which is why I was like, well, if we bring new people in and we train them at the beginning and get them
Could start
working
that.
that way, hopefully it will spin around and they'll question when things aren't right. You know, sometimes it's hard to get people that have been embedded in a system a while to change. It's easier to change the minds of the new people coming in and get those people to drive the new culture. So that's the end of where we are tonight, and that puts us right at 8:07. So I did pretty good there. I do have some more slides here that were leftovers from last week that we're obviously not going to get to. But what did you guys think of this? Was this valuable tonight? Did you learn anything new, or did it validate anything? Was it worth the time?
It was good. I think it leaves me wanting like, what can I do now? Right. Because now my brain is going, and in fact, like today I presented a change management plan for us updating our customer experience values, our customer value proposition. And then I started thinking, okay, we're going to need some sort of knowledge base or knowledge management for when it goes out to the enterprise and people have questions and they want to see how other people are using the standards in their organization. So now what do I do? Where do I go like to set this up? You know, is there a book? Is there
Well, there's JD's book.
yeah, okay. That's
Well,
a start.
I like the idea you're thinking about it in the beginning, Karen. So maybe that needs to be a planning consideration, especially if we're coming up with something new.
Yeah. Now, as I was writing notes and I was like, oh, I need to mention this because that's something that we didn't think about as we're, you know, a typical change management. You're like, we're going to have training, we're going to have, you know, webinars, but where does the knowledge reside? Where does all the documentation live for people to use? So no, I thought this was great and timely for me, speaking selfishly.
Good. I was concerned. I was concerned that there wasn't going to be enough meat on the bones here because you only get an hour. So, but one of the very first things I said is the conversation is just starting, right? These are all ongoing conversations. You're not going to learn this, and this is not something we're going to solve in an hour. So Any other thoughts? Is there anything that we could have done differently that would have been of more value to anybody?
I still want your book list, by the way, Barry.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I put that in the chat. It was in the Slack.
Is it in
channel.
Slack? Did I miss it?
Yeah, I put it in the Slack channel.
Okay. I must have missed it. I'll look for it.
Okay. Do you guys have my email? I don't know that I put that up last time, did I? It's buried.
Put that in
I'll
Slack.
put it in the chat. And then that way, if you guys want to send me it, if you have questions or something, you want to talk about something, I can do that. I think it was in my last slide and I didn't get to it last time.
You've also got it in the Slack channel. I see you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
And you can also hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm a little slower to respond on LinkedIn though. So great. We'll have to come back to the stuff from the first session at another point. Maybe that'll be part of the bonus night when we figure it
Oh,
out.
yeah.
So from what I understand, there's like a month gap now, right? Because there's some other stuff going on, I guess, in the chapter and whatnot. So that we decided to push off a little bit. So the next time we meet will be a double night again. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. All right, well, you guys have a good time over the next month and we'll see everybody later. And if you
Thank
guys
you.
want to chat, use that Slack channel. And if you want to talk to me directly because you got some questions or you just want some advice or whatever, feel free to email me. I will respond as fast as I can.
Excellent. Thanks, Barry.
So much,
Talk to you
Mary.
guys later. Have a good night.
Right.
Bye.
Everyone.
Bye. Scott, if you can